November 12th, 2023. We'll start with the two resolutions that we have first. That should be brief. First, we'll deal with CR-078, 2023, a resolution concerning County Council Rules of Procedure for the purpose of amending the Rules of Procedure for the County Council. Sponsor CR-078, 2023. I guess we haven't updated it, but it was the chair, and I think a few people joined in as sponsors. I think Mr. Olson, Ms. Oriata, Mr. Burrows, and Ms. Blagay. And this was born out of the issues that we had back around March. So I'll turn to Ms. Dennison to orient us and explain the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you are correct. Can you hear? Is this on? Okay. This particular resolution, excuse me, I'm trapped in a cord here. This particular resolution, we began discussions in late March to early. Hello. There we go. Is that better? Okay. So CR-078 is a resolution to amend the County Council rules with regard to the ability to vote virtually. And this discussion started in late March, early April, when there was a council meeting and there were various council members who were participating virtually and were voting virtually as was permitted during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the allowance for council members to participate and vote virtually during the COVID-19 pandemic only lasted while we were under the state of an emergency. And since we are no longer under the state of emergency for the COVID-19 pandemic, at this time, council members are not permitted to vote virtually. So the discussion for this bill was to change, or excuse me, this resolution was to change the council rules to continue to permit that accommodation for council members. In this particular draft, the accommodation is limited to, quote, extraordinary circumstances that are beyond the council member's control. And so this resolution would change Rule 3.1 attendance as well as Rule 8 voting to permit council members to participate virtually and vote virtually.
Is that all?
That is, that's all for now.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so I'll just say that as chair, this obviously became a concern when this was raised. So I asked Ms. Zavakas, Mr. Kumar, and Ms. Dennison to look at this and figure out what we needed to do. And I had hoped to get this sooner, but I guess when we have 100 plus LDRs, things fall by the, more important things go first. So anyway, this is the recommendation of our attorneys to deal with the issue. And I think many of us, except myself, have had need for this. And I'm sure more people will have need for it as time goes on. I think Ms. Ivy could use it today. So are there any questions for Ms. Dennison? Seeing none, I'll look for the direction of the council.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Vice Chair Blagay to adopt, and a second by, was that Mr. Burrows?
And Mr. Chair?
Hmm?
It would be a motion for a favorable recommendation. Since
Yeah.
it's a committee.
Oh, sorry. Motion for favorable recommendation.
Second.
Sorry.
Yeah. By Ms. Vice Chair Blagay, second by Mr. Burrows. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair DeNova.
Aye.
Vice Chair Blagay.
Aye.
Mr. Burrows.
Aye.
Ms. Fisher. No. Mr. Franklin.
No.
Mr. Harrison.
No.
Mr. Hawkins.
Madam Clerk, I absolutely vote no.
Mr. Olson.
Aye.
Ms. Oriata.
Aye.
Ms. Watson.
No.
Motion fails 5-5.
Okay. I'm not sure we should do at this point. It takes 8 votes to pass it, even in committee?
6 votes,
In
because it's
committee?
committee of the whole, so.
Okay.
Takes 6.
Is there a substitute motion? Mr. Burrows?
I'm not sure what my substitute motion would be. I'll let you go. I'll yield to Councilman Moriata.
Mr. Burrows, if you'd yield a second.
I yield.
Yeah, I sent an email to folks asking if people wanted to participate in this resolution, and I also brought this up to several council members last week, and nobody responded. Nobody raised an issue. So I find it interesting because many council members have been out with situations that would have been helped by this. Yeah, so I just find it interesting. I'll turn to Ms. Watson and then Ms. Oriata. Ms. Watson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as much as, I appreciate the intention of the resolution, I just wish it had come sooner. And if we had thought about this when we discussed it, I believe we discussed it publicly during a council session soon after the COVID resolution expired. Would have been great to kind of put it in place then, because since then we've had council members who've been absent and would have liked to have voted prior to this. I mean, we're already in September. I can't remember when the COVID emergency expired, but it's been a few months. So I'm not sure when this legislation was put in, but it would have been nice to have done it right after the expiration of the emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dennison, when did you start on this?
Mr. Chair, we began discussing this in late March, and I do have an email dated April 5th where we were starting to work on a draft.
Okay. Ms. Oriata?
Thank you, Councilman Moriata. I'm very disappointed in the vote that just occurred. I was told that that's the way that the vote was going to occur, so I prepared remarks, but I don't even feel led to read those remarks because I'm so deeply disappointed in my colleagues. One of the key provisions of this rule change is to allow a person to vote when they're on maternity leave. We know that we have a colleague who is pregnant. How many months now? 8 months pregnant. And by not allowing this to move forward today, colleagues would essentially be disenfranchising every single citizen in Councilmatic District 7. Earlier today, we talked about humanity in the Tigray region in Africa. We had a resolution that we voted on and passed unanimously in the name of humanity, forcing a mother to have to come back early in order to represent her constituents, to force her to come in on Tuesdays to cast her votes when this rule would allow her to do that from wherever she is, whether it's in the hospital, whether it's at home properly recovering, is shameful. It's downright shameful. And it's beneath the dignity that we all should have as colleagues for one another. We talk a lot about Black Lives Matter, maternal health care in the Black community, forcing someone to cut short their recovery in order to do their job and uphold their oath is shameful. And so these are my introductory comments. Deja, I'll read the other comments later. But I am deeply disappointed And one thing I do know about Councilmember Oriata is that she will not be denied. Councilmember Oriata will be here, one way or the other. And I would just urge my colleagues to reconsider their vote.
Ms. Uriata?
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Councilmember Burrows. I too was made aware that this vote would go the way it went, and I was made very aware of the reason why. And I have no problem saying it publicly. The intention is to make sure I don't have the ability to vote. And I think that's sad because, like my colleague mentioned, we talk so much about the issues specifically around maternal health and the mortality rate for Black women, especially in Prince George's County, not just in the country, and having the ability to seek the proper care and rest is part of that. And as many of my colleagues know, this has not been an easy, pregnancy for me. I'm a high-risk individual. I've been hospitalized multiple times while still serving on the dais, taken to the hospital from the council administrative building. And the last day at the hospital was this past weekend, but I'm still here and I still show up because I take this job really seriously. And I know some of my colleagues might serve in a different way based on attendance records. But for me, it's important to show up. For me, it's important for me to represent my district. We've had a lack of representation in my seat, where we've had colleagues that have missed 100+ votes, even though they had the opportunity to vote virtually. I refuse to not do the duty that I was sworn to do. And I'm trying to find a balance between my health and doing what my doctors recommend, but also doing my duty and a job that I take very seriously. And so the thought to be penalized because I want to represent my community, because I actually want to show up, because I actually care about the job that I ran for, is sad. And I know that the reason is clear, because like I said, we were told by some of the members on the other side of the vote that it's specifically an issue with me and my ability to vote. And so that using this as a power opportunity, to me, I think is shameful, especially for those that maybe have children or have birthed children or women that are hoping to birth children. To take that stance is shameful. But like my colleague said, I refuse to be disenfranchised. I refuse to have my community be disenfranchised. And if I'm forced to show up the day after I give birth on the dais with my child breastfeeding, I will do that. Do I think I should be forced to do that? No, I don't. And this is something that I brought to the attention of council leadership as well months ago, and was adamant that it should be holistic in a way that addressed the needs of so many different council members that need to vote virtually. Sad that it took the time that it did to get the draft, but we know we had lots of legislation and bills moving. But the notion that this bill was just done last minute, last night for my ability to vote is just not true, and it's false. And as our council attorney mentioned, there's email history of this bill being in conversation for months, not for days. And I've had this also conversation with some of my colleagues that voted no today, offline, about the importance of this and that I was lobbying for this change. So again, the notion that none of these conversations took place or this is last minute is also just not true across the board. So I'm hopeful that my colleagues will see it fit to just have normal decency and pass something that just makes sense for so many of our colleagues instead of intentionally holding legislation to penalize a pregnant woman. I just think it's embarrassing.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Olson, Ms. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am disappointed in this vote. Just today, we received an email from the health officer of Prince George's County. COVID-19 update. COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations are beginning to rise. Unfortunately, this trend is expected to continue. It goes on and on and on. We are in a, I don't know if we're in a post-COVID world or not, but it's certainly still with us. We have members who have gotten COVID recently, and you know, we still have to do the people's business. This is not 2006, not 2010, not 2015. This is 2023. We have the ability to, when there's legitimate reason, when there are caregiving responsibilities, when there's an illness, and I know people here, numerous people here, have had to miss because of family illnesses. I guess they didn't want, you know, I mean, it would make sense to be able to participate and take care of family responsibilities in certain circumstances. You know, I would hope that nobody would abuse this system. I think everybody would want to be here, although some people do miss a lot more than other people. But I just think that in 2023, we've learned a lot. I thought we've learned a lot. But you know, I guess we're not going to move forward on this today, Mr. Chair, but I certainly hope that there will be some soul searching and that we will look, because I think this isn't about one person. I know we've heard it's about one person. I think that this is really something that can affect all of us at any given day. None of us are immune to things coming to us that we have to attend to, and yet we should still be able to do the people's business. So I would certainly ask you know, those on the no side to reconsider, but perhaps that may happen, perhaps it may not. Thank you.
Ms. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say for the record that I think all of my colleagues take their job seriously and are dedicated, and not just this conversation. I've heard many times people's intention on how they serve criticized for how they are on a bill or whatever. So I want to say that I think all 11 members love this county and take what we do seriously. With that being said, I think I'm the only colleague that served in the State House during the pandemic. And during that time, there was no virtual voting. We were there with over 200 people with an annex office and the main State House building, and performed the duties of the state of Maryland because it was not, we could not do any type of virtual voting. I also want to point out that I think good governance is important. I think some of us, or at least I'll just speak for myself, good governance is important. And I had two colleagues give birth and be in Annapolis the entire legislative session, one from Montgomery County and one from Baltimore City, who she not only gave birth, she had it was a very intense, and she was on crutches the entire session. And there was no exception given in that state. So I wanted to just put out for the record, in my perspective, what I've seen in other legislative bodies I've served in and what has been the good governance for the entire state of Maryland. I also want to add that I think people, you know, want to give grace when they want to. I know my own legislation was brought up on this dais when I wasn't able to be here. There was no grace in it being held, but I didn't take it personally. I just thought that was what was the good governance of that committee and what the agenda was for that. And, you know, things happen. So I just want to give the perspective of at least my prior experience and where I'm coming from and what I've personally witnessed and seen. And the two state reps, and they're still state reps right now and still have young children right now, I'm personally good friends with and witness their ability to serve the state of Maryland. And I will tell you right now, that upcoming legislative session is not going to be virtual. And they have to come in regardless and perform their duties.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Vice
Chair.
Chair Blagay,
Can I? No.
and I think Mr. Harrison.
I would say, I would share the comments of Councilman Burrows and really Councilwoman Oriada. Let me just say this. This rule is not just going to benefit one person. It benefits all of us. It doesn't list her name on it. It doesn't list anybody else's name on it. It benefits all of us. This was a conversation that actually started in December. But with things moving so fast, we have not been able to do it. Now, I would say this. We are in a time where majority of the voting bloc are women. We are in a place where our top leaders in the county are women. We are in a place where women lead, and oftentimes the discussion has always been, let's make it easier for women to participate, especially those that are having children. We've seen videos of legislators having to bring their kids to work. We've seen videos of making it easy for work-life balance so that women that do have kids can fully participate. I think we should be the leader. We should be the leader on this issue when we have majority women, when we have leading women in this county. If we do have someone that is going on maternity leave, I think to make it easier for the person to be able to participate is something that we should do to show that we're a leader in the state. And to be honest, many have done this, but we're going to be a leader in the state. So where is our pride in the county to say women leadership matters, especially when we have a women county executive, a women state's attorney? We have women leading in this county. I just think that this is the time that we should set an example and show our leadership. Let's put politics aside. Let's put any of the personal things aside, because at the end of the day, there's no part of this resolution that has Councilwoman Oriada's name on it. It benefits us all, but being the leader on this issue shows, not only does it show humanity, as we talked about today, but it just shows that we're making sure that women can be a part of the process no matter what, especially those that are facing, that are giving birth, that they can be a part, that we can make it easier for them to represent their district. If Councilwoman Oriada has to come here and bring the baby with her to vote, I mean, if that's what we got to do, that's what we got to do. But I think to be a leader, this is not the example that we're setting for the state and really for our residents. Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins?
Mr. Harrison, if you want to go, you can. Mr. Chair, and to the members of this council, since December, I've sat in this chair and listened to your moralistic, holier-than-thou comments. But if you want to know why I'm voting the way I'm voting, look at how you dealt with the assignment to these committees. Look how you all, the 6 of you, have dealt with non-departmental funding for all the organizations throughout this county, not just the 6 of the ones you want. Councilman Oriada, you keep making yourself the victim like you did last week when all I was bringing up that your bill was preempting the state. You went and made it seem like I was attacking you. Like today, I'll say this, for District 2, District 4, District 9, and 2 council members at large that serve this entire 499 square miles of this county, for the way you all are treating us and have treated us. Now it'll be 5 council members plus 5 other council members that'll make one body, and then you all will have to be more open, more honest, and more transparent instead of what you're saying here. The proof speaks for itself. Again, you talk about disenfranchising, you talk about humanity, you talk about what's shameful. Sit where we're sitting, and then you understand why I'm voting. I'm clear why I'm voting the way I'm voting. The rules allow me to make this vote, and I'm making it so now there'll be, you show up, Ms. Oriada, you got that right. But when we vote, you can't keep coming to us trying to give us candy after you done whipped our butt all week. It doesn't work like that. We a county council of 11. You all since December have made it a county council of 6. Let's set the record straight and talk real talk if we gonna talk about real talk. Stop this madness, get a grip.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins, there's certainly responses to that, but I think it's better we move on. Mr. Harrison wants to say something, and then I'd like to hope we're done. Mr. Harrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to bring a comment. My comment's more of a question, and it's to Attorney Dennison. If we look at us as a region, from all the different jurisdictions in the state of Maryland to anything that they're doing in Virginia, has anyone have changed their rules? And what counties were they?
Thank you for your question. Actually, yes, we would just be following the status quo. So Montgomery County has changed their rules to allow for virtual voting, and it was actually from Montgomery County that I derived some of the language to craft our rules. The U.S. House of Representatives has changed their rules to allow for virtual voting, as has the U.S. Senate. Anne Arundel, I know, had it proposed. I would have to double check to see if they passed. But I started looking back in April to see which jurisdictions had done so. And yes, many other jurisdictions, including the federal government, have made these changes in the post-COVID era to allow either virtual voting or voting by proxy.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, one of the things that really I've heard my colleagues go back and forth. And I'm a firm believer right now that this body has some healing to do. Regardless of how we got here, what our viewpoints are, I think that there's been a erosion of trust. I'm going to be honest. At times, there's not a whole lot of trust that I have. But I want each one of my colleagues to be successful within the area that they represent. Because when they're successful, our county's successful. There's a difference of opinion right now, but the way that we've gotten to a point, because we have a difference of opinion in how we vilify and demonize one another, that's what's disheartening to me. That's what's frustrating to me. And so, for the record, I think that this body needs some healing to do. I think every vote has come with a fair amount of stress on each of us. We all take our jobs seriously. I'm not going to say that one council member doesn't take their job serious to the other. We're all learning. We're all in the public eye. We all serve. And that's just my point, right? The points I wanted to make. That how we vilify each other on each vote is sickening. And so for that, we have to do better. And I just wanted to bring that to the opportunity to the body to be able to express.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Are we done?
No. Thank you for letting me go last year. I appreciate that. There were just a few things I definitely felt the need to address. I just want to echo what my colleague, Vice Chair Blagay, said about leading and having the standard. Hearing that some women have had to come to vote on crutches as a reason why we shouldn't do better. I won't even finish the sentence. I think it's an example of why we should do better. We shouldn't allow the fact that other jurisdictions or bodies are behind on providing what's necessary and right, allow us not to do what's necessary and right, and not to do better. I think that's what we're all challenged to do. And then I have to honestly say, I take issue with the idea of either playing the victim, because it was said clearly that this vote and the issue was my ability to vote. And I'm thankful my colleague basically laid it out there when Calvin Hawkins said that it's based on treatment or some type of punishment or the ability to have 5 and 5 votes. It's very clear that this is not on the principle of the legislation. It's not on the principle of changing the rules. It is very clearly personal. And it was said off the dais and on the dais, on the record. So I'm glad that that has been cleared up. And I have to speak for at least, I can't speak for all my colleagues in this, but I also take issue with the fact of acting as if, for me personally, that I have not worked with my colleagues. Offline, I've worked with the administration to pass legislation, to take amendments. Councilmember Mel Franklin and myself, he had a great idea on a piece of legislation and we worked together. Ingrid has asked for things on exceptions for her community that didn't happen on the dais that I did behind the scenes because it was something she needed in her district. So my record speaks for itself that I continuously take amendments from my colleagues, no matter where they sit on votes. I'm continuously willing to work with them on passing legislation. I'm continuously willing to work with the administration on legislation, and I very much keep it to the issue in the bills. If we disagree on one bill, we disagree. The next bill, we might agree. So that's just not true. And so I had to address that. And then I think, lastly, we all have seen what has happened on this dais years before a lot of us even got here. And so the notion that certain political agendas or votes will shift based on the either moral compass or the agenda of the new body is laughable if you think that's not true. That's how it works. We all on this dais don't even agree. There was a vote where Mel and I just had. We were the only no votes. So the idea that we are not going to have places where we disagree, even in these so-called caucuses, is not true. And I just have to make sure that we're clear on the point that there was a time where some people were in maybe leadership and had the power, and who got leadership in committees, who got grants, who got this, who got that, was fully in their power, and there was no complaints then. But now there's complaints because maybe it's not going to your friends and your cronies and your bills and legislation that you disagree with because you've promised developers and you've got money and things are happening differently. But that's because the people voted. And every single thing that we ran on is what we are delivering. That's it. Simple. And if you want something different, that can happen at the ballot box. That's where it happens. And so don't be mad at me or anyone on this body because the community spoke loud and clear about the agenda they wanted, and that's the agenda we're executing.
Ms. Oriata? Okay, I've been lenient on everybody, but technically we don't have a motion on the floor. But if we were explaining our votes, we'd have 2 minutes each. But pretty much almost everybody took more than 2 minutes. Letting passions, it's good to have a passionate debate. I thought Ms. Oriata was our last person. Mr. Burrows, I'm going to put a 2-minute limit on you.
I do have legal questions. Ms. Dennison, if I catch COVID tomorrow, and should I come to work and sit next to my colleagues? Or should I disenfranchise over 100,000 people? I've won over 70%. Like, what should I do?
Thank you for your question, Councilman Burrows. I would suggest that you follow the
Ms.
county's.
Dennison, please speak closer to the mic. The AV team
I'm sorry.
cannot hear you.
My recommendation would be to follow the in-place county procedures and protocols as they relate to COVID-19. And Madam Council Administrator can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that would require a term of possible quarantine if necessary to keep other members safe. But I don't have the protocols in front of me.
And then my follow-up question as it relates to Councilmember Oriata's pregnancy. What reasonable accommodation? I feel like we're denying her a reasonable accommodation by not allowing her to vote.
With your permission, Councilman Burrows, and the permission of the committee, I would like to take a little more time to fully vet the definition of reasonable accommodations and with an employer-employee relationship, if possible, to give you a full answer.
And the last thing I'll say, not to belabor the point because I'm being rushed in this moment, I appreciate your comments because you told the truth. And I respect that. And that's exactly what it was about, and that's what's happening here today. And I also, Mr. Chair, I will, at least for GOFP and for my other EWD, post the attendance records of the members on those committees. Because we have members who spoke against this motion who have the worst attendance records on this entire council. And I will make that publicly available. Thank you.
I think it's time to move on. I'm going to say one scheduling matter. For those who think that not having a virtual rule will affect Ms. Oriata, I'm putting everyone on notice that the last Tuesday in November is the 28th, and we may have council session on November 28th. So mark your calendars. We may be moving from November 14th to November 28th as our final day of session. With that, let's move on. Thank you all for your passionate